Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the new news. It's great to be back. I know we had a little bit of a break there yesterday. It was much appreciated, though. I am also human, and I do need rest every once in a while. So I apologize that we didn't live stream yesterday. It may become a regular or a semi-regular thing for us to take at least a day of to rest and kind of recuperate. But that being said, there has been a lot of news that has happened. We have done a little bit of both yesterday and today in this stream to at least cover the highlights of what happened yesterday. But today had a huge, huge deal happen there in Ukraine. And so I'm glad that we decided not to take today off, because there's a lot of important things that are happening, because the Battle of the Donbas has officially begun today. It happened early this morning, Ukrainian time, and so day 55 initially marks the beginning of that second phase, that second offensive that we had been talking about regarding the buildup for the last few days. And so with that in mind, please check out the description below. There are a bunch of different links that we have to different humanitarian efforts, and even one of them is for the war effort itself for Ukraine, because this new offensive is going to create even more of an influx of people that need help. I mean, those civilians fleeing the combat zones. But that's not the only thing going on. There are still things happening in other parts of the world. We currently have stuff for Southeast Asia, who's still recovering from a large typhoon. And also for Somalia and the Horn of Africa, which is going through a terrible drought. We don't want to forget those places either, even as the events in Ukraine are going on. There are still other places in the world that need our help as well. So if you can't give a lot, give a little, but it's going to become another crucial moment in this phase of the war in Ukraine, and also for those other regions, because a lot of that humanitarian aid supplies that they were getting had to be diverted to Ukraine. So with that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to immediately dive in here and start taking a look what's going on, starting with our subject of the day, which is, of course, Ukraine. And the first thing we're going to hit on happened yesterday, and that is, if I can zoom in here, that missiles struck Lviv yesterday, which caused, we know of at least 7 casualties. 7 civilians were killed by caliber cruise missiles that flew into the city. The city itself has been, for the most part, physically untouched. I wouldn't say it's completely escaped the war, because obviously it has not, being in the country of Ukraine. But yesterday saw a large, relatively for the city, a large bombardment. At least 4 caliber cruise missiles occurred or did fly into the city, and we do have a couple of videos of that today. It would appear that first one no longer exists, so we're going to go ahead and check out the second one.
Там залізничний вроді.
Залізничний вон вокзал.
Вон ще одна летить пиздець. Вон. Та хвиля, що ти шугаєшся?
Звідки воно летіло, сука?
Справа.
Що там таке? Що там таке?
So we're going to head and cut it short there. But at least 4 that we know of did fly into the city. I've seen at least videos of at least 4 caliber cruise missiles. They were reportedly launched. I've heard it that some of them were launched as far as the Caspian Sea, but they were coming. But it seems that they were ship launched, at least, that as far as we can tell. But that's not the only news coming out of Lviv. And the reason that one of the reasons we got to watch some of those cruise missiles come in is because Malcolm Nance, he's a TV military analyst. He's done a lot of different news stations, but he was also a former SEER instructor, which means that basically he trained pilots and special operations guys how to, you know, one, evade, escape, and and conduct survival techniques in the wilderness. But also that also encompasses being captured and tortured and things like that. So, very interesting individual, very knowledgeable individual. But he was actually conducting an interview with NBC Monday live. They were outside in one of the plazas of the city, and the Caliber cruise missile started flying overhead. And so, but that's not the only thing. He's also done some interviews with other news agencies. Of course, he's well connected in that realm, considering he's been on there a lot, talking with them, giving them some kind of a military analysis for a lot of these situations. And during one of his interviews, he actually addressed the President of the United States, stating that what Ukraine needs in order to stop civilian casualties is this long-range counter-battery artillery. So that heavy duty can really throw around far down range kind of stuff to make it to where the Russians can't put their own artillery close enough to these cities to even bombard them and keep these civilian casualties to a minimum. And that came as amongst for a call of a bunch of other heavy weapons. But we do see here he is in the country, but that is Malcolm Nance. And he is ready to go get some. So, best of luck to him. I hope he can provide some very good knowledge and training to those around him while he is serving there in Ukraine. And also coming out of Kyiv today, we know that that Ukraine has stated yesterday that it had officially filled out that questionnaire presented by the EU's President Ursula von der Leyen. I'm sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly. But it was presented during her visit on the 8th, and yesterday, they stated that they had officially completed that, which means it's the beginning of the process to fast track the country of Ukraine into becoming part of the European Union. But with an interesting development is something that we actually discovered on our own today. And this was very interesting. It wasn't something that we found and are reporting on amongst some video evidence. It's the fact that one of our sources, which is actually the Twitter for the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Twitter has actually suspended it. So I have it right here. I pulled it right off of our thing. And as you can see, they have suspended it. They said it violated some of Twitter's rules and guidelines. Most notably, it's saying things such as violence. Not quite sure of the repercussions for that or what. I don't know if there's been any outcry regarding that. This isn't the first time Twitter has taken a step against a political entity or a controversial entity on either side. I'm sure there has already been some outcry. We just haven't seen a whole lot of it yet. But for your information, if you are trying to get more information on what's going on in Ukraine, that is no longer a viable source for you. The Armed Forces of Ukraine, their Twitter is officially suspended. And up by Chernihiv today, we got an update on Cartridge. So Cartridge it moved from the northwestern part of Kyiv, where he was he was helping EOD root out unexploded ordnance, and now he is doing that up, and I'm going to try and pronounce this, in Shestovitsia, which is in the Chernihiv region. And once again, this dog is amazing. I think he's absolutely adorable. How can you not love this right here, folks? You can't. This is adorable. He's got his own vest, his own little flak jacket. Like it's adorable. And he's a good boy. He's found of at least that we know of 150 pieces of unexploded ordnance. So that is fantastic work. Of course, he's always a winner with the kids. But great. He is a military working dog. He's an EOD dog, bomb sniffing dog. So he is being used for a good purpose up in there. And that's actually one of the few things of news that we've had out of this region regarding those efforts. We have not had a whole lot still coming out of this region. It's been relatively quiet. Immediately, we skip past Kharkiv and we move down towards Izium and even more so Rubizny and Severodonetsk. The first big news that we know of, like I said today earlier, the offensive did begin. Russia, which has been building up this massive offensive, has officially launched it today. An estimated 74 battalion tactical groups are currently in fighting. That is between 70 and 90,000 Russian troops along over a 300-mile or a 500-kilometer long front. And they are currently, from the best analyses that we have seen, they're trying to do a large-scale encirclement along this eastern front, much like what we were talking about earlier. They're trying to pin the Ukrainian forces here from Izium moving down, and from the southern flank and in Donetsk and pushing up. And that 70 to 90,000 troops does not also include the forces, the separatist forces of the DPR and the LPR. I know that in Russia they are considered the LNR and DNR. However, and one of the things of being a country, just in order to be a country, you have to be recognized by multiple other nations in order to be considered a country in your own right. And these are not. They are not considered. Russia is the only country that considers it. I think Russia and Belarus are the only countries that even consider them actual nations. So, with that, we do know with the start of the offensive, Russia, confirmed by both Ukraine and the Russian forces, captured Crimea today. I'm sorry, my pronunciation is terrible. And so we can take a look at that here. But we do know that they did take this location. It was confirmed by both Ukraine and Russia. And it's also been said that there is very heavy and intense fighting near Rubizny. Now, Rubizny has been known for the nitric acid tanks that have been hit the last couple of times. But there has been reportedly very intense fighting in and around the city as Ukrainian forces are putting up a stiff resistance in this area to keep them from pushing and encircling Severodonetsk, which is also seeing intense fighting both in or on the outskirts and just outside of the city. We know that there are Ukrainian defensive lines along this sector, and it's created a bulge in their front. We also are seeing that there's large amounts of Russian shelling here in this region. So in the Luhansk, we have thermal imaging. Someone, we don't know if it's Ukrainian or if it's Russian, used a thermal image or imaging device in order to record one of these bombardments, one of these Russian bombardments in the Luhansk area. We do not know exactly where this is at, but this is the information we have. And so as you can see, not a light bombardment. We're going to take another look at this. I mean, this is likely a Grad system from what I can tell, which is one of those Katyusha launchers they have. It's those trucks that have a bunch of rocket tubes on the back of them. It's technically an MLRS system. It's a Katyusha launcher. The only thing that's changed since World War II when they first came up with the idea is the fact that the truck has been updated, and that's about it. And then we also know down here near Popasna, where we've seen a lot of fighting before, we've seen where the Wagner group essentially got wiped out down here, at least their detachment that was sent to this region. We also have seen where possible white phosphorus has been used against Ukrainian forces here. And so today there's also been reports that Popasna has seen also very heavy fighting. It's currently holding up the Russian troops around this city. From our understanding, it has not been taken yet, but once again, there's 70 to 90,000 troops, and it's not believed that all of them are committed yet, but they're currently on the move. And so, very interesting. We do know that this is one of the regions. It's very possible that Russia was using the Wagner group in order to probe the Ukrainian lines and see where they would be the weakest versus the strongest at. Because we did see some minor skirmishes and assaults by Russian forces, but nothing major. So, once again, they probably were probing Popasna, decided this would be a lot easier than just spearheading through any of these other cities, and it would serve as a better route for them, and then went from there. Going over here behind the lines, we do know that Russian jets are currently being used in order to what is essentially support the ground forces, on top of the terrain being much more suited for Russian doctrine. Russian doctrine, as we all know, relies heavily on armored vehicles. They put their armored vehicles first, and then they put the infantry behind them. And so this maneuver warfare, this open ground, is much more suited for tanks moving in a way that Russia is trained for. All those doctrine videos that you saw from the military training prior to the invasion, what the cover story was for the buildup, was them operating in line on flat ground, conducting maneuver warfare tactics. This is what they're expected to be using, and this is kind of what we're already seeing. Also, we're seeing them use a lot better, or at least attempting to use better combined arms warfare, meaning they have their jets and they're directly supporting ground troops. Not the jets are doing their thing, the ground troops are doing their thing. They are doing things together. One asset is supporting another. So that is probably something they're trying to incorporate in order to give them another advantage. Not sure if how effective it's being, but that is what has been looking like today. We have another video of that same jet from a different point of view. Now, I did see more stuff, a lot of photos that seemed like someone had shot this jet down, and Ukraine is claiming they shot down 2 additional jets today, but I couldn't confirm that this was even in the same place, so I did not add these. It looked like it would have been a cool story if we had seen this from start to finish, but I couldn't confirm it, so it did not appear here, but there were some images to suggest that that jet was shot down. Just can't confirm it. Moving a little bit further south, we can see more of the same kind of ideology here, as Mi-24s were operating in support of ground forces there in the area of Donetsk. As you can see as well, we have adjusted this battle line to show areas that have been captured already, and those movements of Russian forces where we do know Ukrainian forces have withdrawn. There was a pretty significant pocket up here. Ukrainian forces are known to have withdrawn from that area in order to, because they were at risk of being encircled between Izium and once they had captured here in Kamina or Kramina, they were possibly going to be encircled, so they withdrew. I can't say how far, but that is what it appears. But we can see down here in Donetsk the Mi-24 helicopter gunships, which is one of the more common ones. It's been around for decades. But we saw these in support of ground forces in Donetsk. So, no sound with that, unfortunately. Short clip, but what we're learning, at least with today, is that there wasn't a lot of information that immediately has come out. Today, for the most part, the information has been very limited. A lot of stuff just is stuff that we're hearing. We're getting kind of conflicting reports. So I have stated this on the Discord once I found out about this situation, because I found out while I was at work today. But with this situation, much like any other situation, Ukraine, since the withdrawal and the major fighting up by Kyiv, outside of rocket attacks on places like Kharkiv and Severodonetsk and the missile strikes in Kramatorsk, for the most part, it has been quiet. And when we started this channel, we were, I believe, on day 33. And so the war had, for the most part, kind of moved into a lull in the fighting. I wouldn't say the fighting stopped, but it moved into a lull. It was a lot more quiet. With a battlefield and offensives and things like this, there is a major factor called the fog of war. And this can cause a lot of misinformation to get reported. We do try to mitigate this, but this is a very fluid situation, and there is limited avenues to get independent sources on this and independent information. We try and verify everything we can, but that doesn't mean that we're going to be 100% correct all of the time. And I want to make sure that I put that forward, because we're going to do our best to report on this as accurately as we can, but I cannot guarantee anything simply because of the nature of warfare. So we could be seeing stuff that's actually a couple days old tomorrow, or we could be seeing stuff that happened today tomorrow, of course, as more information comes out. But it's a very fluid, very confusing, chaotic situation, and so I want to be upfront that is very difficult to be accurate. And while we will try our best, when we do know that we make mistakes, we will correct those, and we will correct those very publicly. But be understanding going forward as you're watching our channel that we are only giving as best information as we can. We're not there. So, moving forward, here we have heard today here in Marinka that Russian forces initially had taken this area. They were, apparently, Ukraine launched a small counteroffensive in this area that officially reclaimed the village of Marinka. They declared it cleared. And this is something that we also are getting from Ilya Ponomarenko, who is one of our sources, and they are a reporter with the Kyiv Independent. It also apparently it also came out on the UA Live map. And there's also noted significant fighting in this area. If you go and look at the Institute Study for War, their official report is out for today already. And they are doing daily report updates, and that is a relatively good source as well. And we also saw today that there was a lot of troops are moving in this area. Essentially, if we zoom in here, I think I may have gone too far. Basically, from Verkhinya Tersa to... where is it at? Looking here, I apologize, folks. Velika Novosilka. Once again, I'm sorry about pronunciation. Basically, along this entire area here has been nothing but bombardments and troop contacts. There's been heavy shelling between both of these. And it's a very wide axis of what is expected to be advance. They are saying, both Ukrainian intelligence and Russian forces are saying that they are pushing from the south. So it does make sense. It is a very wide open front for them here. And so we are seeing, there was a lot of reports of aircraft bombing different villages around here, including Poltavka, Zatishishia. So it's, once again, a very fluid information situation. We don't have any photos or anything that we could independently verify. There were some on the UA Live map, but we couldn't independently verify them with anywhere else. so they are not appearing here. Just know that this is reportedly a very large offensive, and from what we could observe from other sources, it was for the most part between these two cities. So we'll keep our eye on there. Hopefully we'll get some more information in the following days. And going down to Mariupol, there has been enough information now to coming out to say that all of the last Ukrainian forces are in the Azovstal steelworks compound. With this, we initially said that there wasn't enough independent evidence to support this. That obviously has changed within the last 48 hours. It likely would have been changed yesterday had we been reporting yesterday and not on a break. But we can see here there is reports of extremely heavy Russian shelling. There's unconfirmed reports of civilian deaths, as there are civilians in the Azovstal compound. They are hiding in there. Reportedly, Russia dropped, I think, what they think is a Fab 3000 onto the bunker that they were staying in. A bunch of people are supposedly trapped. Many others have been killed. Basically, this steelworks site has been bombed almost off the face of the earth. The entire thing has been destroyed from what even Azov is saying. The whole thing is destroyed, let alone what the Russians are saying. And they don't have to say much because they already destroyed they wiped the city of Mariupol off the face of the earth with as much shelling as they've conducted. There was a very highly publicized small counterattack that they conducted either yesterday or today. Probably just out here in these little it look like these civilian housing blocks right outside of the Azovstal. But from what we can tell, it really didn't make a significant difference, and it made for great publicity, and we got the public's attention because everyone wants to see Ukraine win. But for all intents and purposes, the Azovstal today was being stormed by the Spetsnaz. We do know. Supposedly the Spetsnaz were storming it, supposedly, as well as what is likely Russian Marines, the DPR forces there. I don't think the Chechens, because the Chechens I don't think they're actually committed to the fight at this point. They got in like one skirmish and ran, so as far as we could tell. We do know that some of those Kadyrovites or the Chechens were injured by Ukrainian forces during that small counterattack because they were filming some propaganda campaigns while they're over here, but they aren't committed directly into the fighting. There's heavy bombardment, carpet bombing, shelling, storming, and right now there is not a lot of information coming out of here, but the situation in Mariupol is grim, and it is not looking good currently. And to hammer that home a little bit here, and I had to do some reading on this because I'd reported on it before, but I didn't truly understand what I was talking about when I was saying it, so I kind of was a little bit sketchy on this. However, we're also getting this from the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv today, that between 20 and 30,000 residents of Mariupol are being held in what are called filtration camps or filtration points. Between 5,000 and 7,000 of those are expecting to be forcefully deported to Russia. And this is something, once again, this is the U.S. Embassy for Kyiv. So we're not the only ones saying this. Well, Ukraine is not the only one saying this. And it's apparent, and it is reliable enough for the U.S. to be backing it, to say this. Which the U.S. has been, while very supportive of Ukraine, when it comes to the information they're willing to back, they have been very reserved and conservative with their estimates on casualties, their numbers, what they're saying, how they're saying it. So for something to be this obvious means it's probably a relatively solid lead there. For those that don't know what a filtration camp is, filtration camps really came to light during the First and the Second Chechen Wars, when Russia was fighting the Chechens, who are also the Kadyrov here. Kadyrov, his father, was actually part of the Chechen separatists there in Chechnya. In fact, Grozny was almost essentially wiped off the face of the earth by Russian forces. Very bloody wars. In 2000, the International Criminal Court actually convicted several individuals of the Russian Federation for war crimes relating to the filtration camps. In fact, that included the rape, systematic beating, torture, and summarily execution of multiple victims at these camps. Essentially, it's concentration camps without a crematorium. That is essentially what it is. It is a camp that you systematically beat and torture people and then execute them. That is what these camps are. An estimated 200,000 Chechens during the First and Second Chechen Wars were put into filtration camps. Many of them were not released until basically the Russian officials in charge of the camps were bribed outrageous sums of money in order for them to be released. There are still war crimes tribunals currently being held by the International Criminal Court regarding these. And if you don't believe me in what I am saying, without a doubt, please go research it. It is. I had to do that because I had no idea what a filtration camp was until today. In fact, a few hours before the stream. And I am absolutely appalled to learn that this thing is happening. So, then that is my personal bias, of course. But it has been very well reported on from the 90s. So, very concerning to hear that coming out, especially and being credible enough for the United States to also throw its weight behind it. Moving on over here to Mykolaiv, while we have heard a little bit about the offensives currently going on, there has been a little bit of news regarding the counteroffensive, but nothing substantial enough to be able to report on it in a very founded light. There has been some news, but nothing that we can really independently verify. But we do know that for the last roughly 48 hours, Mykolaiv has been under very intense bombardment. They have been shelled 2 nights in a row now. We do not know the casualties at this point in time, but we do know that yesterday they were under pretty heavy bombardment, and tonight, from what we're hearing, they are also once again under heavy bombardment. I'm sorry, once again, we do not have any of the links to go with this. It's just not. We've heard audio clips of the explosions, which I can't verify because I can't see videos. Some of these videos are kind of questionable, but from all that we have heard, we do know that Mykolaiv is under intense bombardment. We've also heard Kharkiv is, but I haven't seen enough information to confirm that as well. But that is what we have coming out of Mykolaiv along this front. And with that, we have covered all of the news inside of Ukraine itself, inside the country. There is still some stuff regarding Ukraine and Russia, but for inside the country itself, that is what we have. I am sorry that there is not as much video and photo evidence as we like to put on here. Some of it is very graphic. Some of it is stuff that is questionable, the material, but we've also heard enough about the situation itself to be reporting on. And once again, this is a very fluid, dynamic situation that has a lot of chaos involved with it, that my first instinct would not be to pick up my cell phone and videotape it. My first instinct would be I would really like to get out of here because I would like to live. So I do not blame anyone for not videotaping and telling us where this is happening. They have much more pressing matters at this point. But as we learn more information and get more details, if we made any mistakes, we'll be correcting that going forward, very publicly, very openly, both on the stream and in the Discord. If you will likely hit the Discord first, just because I do pretty frequent updates and pretty instant releases on that stuff once I find out. So if you want to learn more, I post it in the announcements. Come join us on the Discord, and you'll see every time I mess up, I will immediately post that I know I messed up and explain why they're on the Discord. But please bear with us. It's a very chaotic situation and difficult to report accurately. We were trying our best, but we can only do so much. And with that, we're going to move on to the international news, starting with the Ukrainian focus stuff here in Belarus and Russia. And that's today today we saw more equipment getting moved from Belarus near Gomel to the Eastern Front. It was loaded onto train cars. Just because this offensive has started does not mean the equipment stops coming. Russia knows they're going to lose vehicles. They have to replace them. So even if they don't have, even if they don't necessarily need these vehicles to start the offensive, they will need to replenish any battalion tactical groups that get, they are, being beaten up and they're taking losses. They got to replace those losses, and that includes equipment. So even if they're not there for the start, they will be there to replenish that force and keep it fresh.
No.
So let's take a look here.
Да, подбитая, конечно, трохи техника, но будет, видимо, атаковать. Да, подбитая, конечно, трохи техника, но...
And so, not a crazy thing of information. We've seen plenty of this before, but it's still pertinent because we know that Russia is still using those rail lines and they're still moving troops and equipment into this area. So that way, not only are they going to try and get this momentum going at the start, but they want to be able to keep it going. They want to be able to sustain that initiative, sustain that momentum as they continue to try and sweep across the country, especially attempting to do these encirclements, because until they can complete it, this encirclement is going to be a very difficult fight for them. And as we move up to Moscow today, there has been an unofficial deadline made by Russia for their successes, at least when it comes to Mariupol, let alone with the rest of the Donbas. But there is a kind of a semi-formatted deadline for these operations and for some kind of victory from them. And that is May the 9th. May the 9th is the day that Russia celebrates Victory in Europe Day from World War II. They hold large military parades. It hasn't changed since the Soviet Union days. It's still lots of ICBMs and jets flying over. And today we saw the Russian Air Force practicing its Z formation, which is I'll get to the history with that. We'll have a little tidbit there, but this is the Russian Z formation above Moscow, and this is coming from, of course, a Russian state media news source. So let's take a look. Nothing crazy. It's not a very long video, but it's 10 seconds that says a lot. And the reason this says a lot is because there's some irony in it. Russia is saying that their quote-unquote special military operation in Ukraine is one, to destroy Nazis, which they say the Azov Battalion, which is currently trapped in Mariupol, is a Nazi regiment. And they are also trying to secure the liberty of the people in the Donbas, which they're really only doing it for their own military gains, but that's beside the point. They'll just attempt to annex them when it's over, much like they did Crimea. But the irony here is that they have been compared very often to the Nazis. And I didn't show it here today because I really do not I refuse to show Nazi propaganda on this channel. Like, I refuse to do that. But prior to the outset of World War II, Nazi Germany did hold military parades, and one of their more famous things was flying some of their older aircraft, their show aircraft, in a swastika formation above the parades. That was something that the Nazi regime did. There are videos online if you wish to check it out. I find some irony in that, considering the comparisons that have already been made. I don't necessarily believe in those comparisons all the time, but it is kind of funny and kind of ironic all the same. And moving on, the 64th Brigade was given an honorary title today, which in and of itself isn't something crazy, except when you realize that the 64th Battalion, or the 64th Brigade, was actually the unit in charge of the areas in and around Bucha during the time of the occupation. And yesterday, on Monday, the 18th, Putin did give them an honorary title. We did have this translated by our in-house translator, and they were given this for bravery. It's been very obvious the war crimes is currently an international investigation ongoing. I don't know what else to really add to that. There's an international war crimes investigation going on regarding the very obvious war crimes that were committed, to the point that we even here now state that we are Ukrainian biased because we cannot morally support anything that has been seen by the Russian forces. Let alone Bucha and Hostomel, and Irpin. There's no way the Ukrainians have enough firepower near Mariupol to level the entire city. They just don't have it there. If they did, they would have broken the encirclement. That's all Russia's doing. All in and of itself. We've seen time and time again. I'm not saying that there aren't some bad eggs in the Ukrainian forces. There certainly has to be some bad eggs in the Ukrainian forces. I don't blame them. Their country's getting invaded and these people are killing their friends and family and children and God knows who else, but I don't blame them for being angry, but I do believe that some of them may have taken it too far. It's not highly reported, I'm sure, but I'm sure it has happened. I don't deny that. I never will. But the level is very different. We've seen lots of Russian prisoners. We've also seen lots of summarily executed people on the Russian side. So we've seen cities leveled by Russia. So we can't justify here on this channel to not back Ukraine. But this is literally a Kremlin backing of what they did. So I can't. Yeah, but just know that they got awarded bravery after they committed atrocities in Bucha. However, some more interesting news is the fact that Google says it's not to blame for the weird new satellite feeds coming out of Russia. See, what's interesting is when Google's satellite images are taken, before they are allowed to post those images online, they have to be submitted to governments across the world so that those governments can cover up things like if they have 20 helicopters, they want to edit those photos to show that they have 10. It's in the interest of national security. You also don't want to show where your nuclear missile silos are in the middle of Montana. Well, you edit those out and now it just looks like the rest of the ground. And then you send them back to Google and Google can post them. That doesn't appear to be happening anymore for Russia, as some things have magically popped up. Now, some of this stuff may have just not been seen prior to this because people are now looking. But as we found out earlier, that all of this information at these coordinates, there are dummy aircraft at their bases. And not only that, so that's the Twitter. Here's Google Maps for you. Here is Google Maps. And lo and behold, there is nothing but a bunch of fake aircraft on a tarmac. I think those might be real. These might be real. Like, not all of these, I'm sure, but these are. There's no way that those are real. They don't look real. Here's another one. Here's the stuff that may have just not been noticed, but here's a fake Concorde for you. A knockoff. And if that's not cool enough for you, let's see if we can find it here. Yep, there's a Russian space shuttle. Like, and I'm sure this looks like it's probably a museum of some kind. You can see the Concorde there. I just didn't go very far. So I'm sure this may have just not been noticed, but the dummy aircraft is definitely something you'd probably spray paint out. But it's very telling as to how Russia portrays itself versus what it actually is. They were expected to be this world-renowned, very competent fighting force. They're getting their butts kicked in Ukraine, had to retreat because they couldn't take the capital, said it was in good faith for negotiations, but basically they bought some time, and now they're going to try and launch another offensive in the place they tried to launch an offensive already in 2014, and it didn't go very well. And that was in 2014 when Ukraine was much more in turmoil than it is now. At least internally, domestically. So, very interesting developments coming out of that region. But we're now going to go ahead and we're going to move on because there have been some very interesting developments in other parts of the world as well. And so the first thing that we have, and this was big news coming in from last night, is the fact that the IDF, or the Israelis, conducted airstrikes in the Gaza Strip. The Gaza Strip is a Palestinian sector, much like the West Bank, of Israel. Basically, Palestinians get the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, and the rest of Israel is all for the Jewish population, Jewish majority population, Israelis, because they don't get along. Now, Hamas, which is what I guess Israel would consider them a terrorist organization. But anyway, Hamas is in control of the Gaza Strip. They kind of have a semi-autonomous government there. After the recent escalations and killings within Israel, they went ahead and they bombed this area. We do have some videos of the bombing, but also reportedly, and we have video evidence of this as well, at least 2 Strela, which is the Russian equivalent of Stinger missiles, 2 Strela missiles were also fired at the Israeli aircraft while they were passing overhead. But let's take a look at these videos. Very shocking. We got some from further away, we have some very up close, and we have, of course, at least two of the Strelas that were shot. So let's take a look. And then now we're going to take a little bit of a closer look here. So as you can see, I don't know about you, but I probably wouldn't be standing outside filming this. I would be very, very, very scared. But what we do know is, of course, there hasn't so far been any reported casualties. This was apparently in response to a rocket attack that came from the Gaza Strip by Hamas. But here we have what was supposedly, and if you watch closely in that video, you can see one of the jets shooting out some countermeasures, much like we see Russian jets doing when they're flying in Ukraine. Or at least one of the Israeli jets did shoot off some countermeasures, and we think we know why. And that's because they're reportedly Hamas fired 2 Strela shoulder-fired anti-air missiles, which are man pads, at those jets in response to the airstrikes. So let's take a look. We think this is at least one of them.
رشقة صاروخية الآن رشقة صاروخية. الله أكبر، رشقة صاروخية الآن رشقة صاروخية كما ترون عبر البث المباشر.
إذن
الله أكبر
على ما يبدو
الآن.
Not to say I can't blame them. Reportedly, according to Hamas, they did not hit anything worthwhile. They said they hit a bunch of empty facilities. Not sure regarding the truth on that. But as we move just across the border here into Egypt, we have some more information regarding the Islamic State. And that's because the Islamic State seems to have had a little bit of a surge in attacks again. This time, they conducted a couple of different attacks on militiamen that are supporting government forces in this region, in this border region, near Sheikh Zuweda. And so we do know that there were some injured and maybe some killed. We don't know the extent, but that's as much as we know at this time. We have a little bit coming out of there. Let's take a look.
غنام الصحوات، الله أكبر، غنام الصحوات، تكبير، الله أكبر ولله الحمد. هذا هالكابتن الصحوات، اللهم لك الحمد. هذا غنام الصحوات، اللهم لك الحمد، اللهم لك الحمد، اللهم لك الحمد. ها هي سياراتكم يا أعداء الله، ها هي سياراتكم يا أعداء الله. والله أنكم سوف ترون منا الشدة والبأس، ولا تظنون أن ضعفنا، فوالله أن
So that is coming from the Islamic State. Let's see what else we got here. Some videos of them firing on or a photo of them firing on whoever during one of these attacks. More photos of the attacks. So that's not the only news we have coming about the Islamic State, however. We do know up here in Syria, the Islamic State released a video regarding attacks they conducted on Kurdish forces. There are also 2 separate attacks. We don't know which video this is of which one. They're both nighttime IED attacks. They killed and wounded roughly about a dozen or so Kurdish fighters that from our understanding. One of them had 6. So one said that 6 had been killed and wounded. Another one said that several had been killed and wounded. We just don't know, so we're saying roughly a dozen here, just from that information. But let's go ahead and take a look. Very quick, to the point, but an IED strike on a truck. Toyota Hilux somewhere in Syria, as far as we can tell. So keep that in mind as we move on. And that is because there's some more information today regarding Turkey, actually. So Turkey and a group called the PKK, which is a communist Marxist group of the Kurdish forces, you have a couple of different groups within the Kurds. You have the YPG, YPJ, YPK, and PKK. The YPG, YPJ are democratic forces. The PKK is what Turkey considers a terrorist organization. They're not. I believe they're the only ones that have them on a terrorist watch group. But the PKK are a Kurdish Marxist group that has fought a lot with Turkey inside of Turkey itself. But I can't. But in the last 48 hours, Turkey, which already has launched a military operation in Syria regarding this, now has officially launched one into Iraq, into the semi-autonomous region of Iraqi Kurdistan. So they were apparently using special operations forces and aircraft in order to conduct strikes against PKK forces in the region for their own national security concerns. Don't know the entire extent of this. It doesn't seem like it's a massive invasion like what they did in northern Syria, but it seems to at least follow the same kind of pretext prior to the incursions. The Iraqi government, so far as we are tracking, has not said anything against this. We don't know if they allowed this to occur or if this is something Turkey said, we're going to do it anyway. But that is the information we have, and we have a little bit coming out from here as well. So not a whole lot of information, but we do know that Turkish forces are operating inside of Iraq against the Kurdish PKK in their own semi-autonomous region. As we move for a little bit further south near Kirkuk, there was some stuff that was happening in Diyala province, which is over by Baghdad, but we have more Islamic State attacks. In fact, this one was on a Shiite shrine. They used mortars and dropped rounds on the Shiite shrine. Apparently, according to the government forces, there wasn't any damage. Photos are currently saying otherwise, which I believe this is a photo of that shrine. It definitely looks like it was damaged. But we do know that also Hash-Shababi, which is a popular mobilization force, much like Kataib Hezbollah, it's a government-backed militia that is currently, they mobilized and are currently going to guard further shrines in Kirkuk. And so we can see them here. Still rocking the 1990 Toyota Hilux. I love it. And the Islamic State attacks don't stop there. In fact, there's one coming out of Afghanistan today that has caused an international incident between Afghanistan and Uzbekistan. Now, Afghanistan and Uzbekistan and Tajikistan have all of these different areas up here. For instance, Afghanistan is not able to produce its own power in a large enough quantity to really supply their population. So they rely a lot on imports for energy. One of the things that we've seen the Islamic State do is up here in the north, they actually went and they destroyed one of the power cables, essentially, one of those power electrical poles that was running that electrical grid out of Tajikistan. And then now yesterday, the Islamic State fired rockets into Uzbekistan from around the Heratan area, and they were targeting military barracks in Termez, which is just over here across the border. They fired roughly 10 Katyusha rockets, which we don't know the size of them. There are different sizes of Katyusha rockets. Could be anything from smaller 80 something millimeter, 81 millimeter rockets to anything up to like 123 millimeters or higher. Don't know how big. Don't know if there were any casualties. Do not believe there were. Didn't hear anything coming from Uzbekistan saying that. But they apparently fired these Katyushas across the border, hit them, or hit the barracks and the areas around it. But the Taliban today came in and they did find where there was a house, and they did find a Katyusha launcher that is believed to have been used in the incident. So we have a few things coming of that here. This is coming, of course, from I believe that's the Islamic State. I cannot read Arabic well enough to tell you that precisely, but we do have a video here, so let's take a look. So there you have the Katyushas firing. And here we have the Taliban finding it.
ده خطرناك شيء ده شيل الميلاد ده خو یو نفر دلته پورته منځل کې شته
So what we do know is that I don't know if you heard what he was saying, that guy the Taliban fighter, but he said the word Daesh or Dash, which is what they say when they're talking about the Islamic State. They're talking about Islamic State fighters. They say Daesh or Dash. So if you're ever saying that or seeing that, it's Daesh, I think is how they write it. But in response to this, the Uzbeki military, specifically their Air Force, conducted a large number of flights and incursions into the Afghan airspace today as a show of force regarding its ability that if they really wanted to, if this stuff keeps happening and the Taliban doesn't take care of it, they could just roll into the country no problem. It seems to be what the message being sent here is. Can't confirm that exactly, but I don't know why else you would fly this many helicopters into Afghan airspace. So let's take a look.
څنګه ډیر روان دي اخوان وشمار قدوش كده ما بلاكي
So, I also don't know if you can tell, but there's only one helicopter in the world that makes that kind of a chopping sound, and that is a UH-1 Bell Huey helicopter, same ones that were used during the Vietnam War. So, there are many different variants, but from my understanding, Uzbekistan does have a significant amount of UH-1 Huey helicopters in their rotary air fleet. So, but all of those, from what I could tell, were all Hueys. So, very interesting turn of events. But that isn't the only thing that happened in Afghanistan today. As we saw in Kabul, there were several different attacks. These were on at least 2 different schools. One was a suicide bomber who detonated himself in the middle of the crowded hallways. And then a follow-on suicide bomber detonated themselves out when they were evacuating the wounded. That left at least 20 killed and dozens more wounded, as well as another at least IED. We believe it was or suicide bomber. We're not quite sure on that. That went into a classroom and detonated themselves and injured at least 6 students. So that is currently what's happening. That group, no group has actually taken responsibility for the attacks. We just know that this has happened, and so we have a couple different photos regarding that here. Obviously, there was a lot of very graphic things that we could not show. Just a quick video of the aftermath. And some of the things that had to be tossed aside following the attack, of course. But that are the developments in Afghanistan. And as we skip over Pakistan, as there are still some things happening in the country, just not within the last 48 hours, of course, we can move down into New Delhi. So here in India, there's apparently been some anti-Semitic kind of tendencies on what is reportedly by the Hindu population, which is the dominant religion in India, against a minority of Muslim population in India. And this is one of many things that causes tensions between Pakistan and India as two nations. On top of the Jammu and Kashmir region, that is one of their kind of issues between the two of them, is they have very large religious differences. And so today, Muslim minority population took to the streets, many of them brandishing swords, because they or their families and friends had either been attacked, or and when they had been attacked, there wasn't really any justice for them. So that population is feeling very threatened currently, and so they did take to the streets and protest in New Delhi today. From my understanding, the protests did not turn violence in any way, but nonetheless, there was the capacity for it to, if someone had so wished. And over here in Shanghai, kids have started to return to school, but not without extreme COVID-19 measures. Now, China has what's called a zero COVID policy, which means that Shanghai was put into immediate lockdown and nobody was allowed to leave their homes. That has caused food riots. In fact, over the last 48 hours, they've released their first 2 reports on fatalities due to the virus. Reportedly, there are tens of thousands of people that have tested positive for COVID-19 in the city. They're being put into some rather, I wouldn't say, satisfactory conditions in their quarantine if they are being if they are testing positive. In fact, there's been some photos that were leaked that showed them sleeping like 30 to a room or something like that. It was insane, basically stacked on top of each other. But yesterday they stated that they had 3 fatalities. Today they had another 7, bringing up the official total to 10. However, it is highly believed that is probably very skewed. Much like many other things when it comes to misinformation, it's a selective release of information. So, not quite sure how they're contributing to those deaths numbers, those fatality numbers. But that number is probably, if it's as serious as they are portraying it, that number is also probably much higher. It just has not been released yet. And this also does not include that the many that are expected to have died of dehydration and starvation. Clean water and food was an initial insecurity following the lockdown in the city. In fact, there were food riots and looting throughout the city, which was then put to rest once the military came in. Those protests are still ongoing but the military is there in what has been essentially an undeclared martial law. They even brought in armored vehicles, which we had videos of that we showed here on the stream. But it is estimated that hundreds of people may have died of starvation and or dehydration due to the lack of supplies and able to prepare for the extended lockdown. On top of that, that is with people that are likely to have also go undiscovered in their homes until the lockdown ends. So there is some concerns, but we do have a photo of those kids going back to school. Or a video, rather. So to move on, we have here in Somalia the fact that Al-Shabaab shelled the parliament, and Al-Shabaab is a terrorist group that's been around for decades. They are essentially the African sect of Al-Qaeda. They were formed following, of course, Al-Qaeda's rise to power, and of course Al-Qaeda's kind of fell out of power, considering things like the Islamic State have come up and Boko Haram, but that doesn't mean that they still aren't prevalent. And today they showed that as the Senate was having a meeting, and the newly elected Senate, no less, was having a meeting in the parliamentary chambers, they shelled that chambers. At least 2 people were injured. And so it's a very concerning. They are targeting. However, there is a lot of turmoil in the country of Somalia. In fact, within the last 30 years, there's been a couple of issues regarding famine. We know right now there's a severe drought that is expected to have at least 350 people die of dehydration or malnutrition by June, as well as affect another 1.4 million people with acute malnutrition. And those numbers are coming from the UN. There's been famines in this country. In the 1990s, saw several times where UN missions, which were attacked by warlords in the country, had to be further secured by U.S. military intervention, including there were U.S. Marines there. Of course, the Battle of Mogadishu, better known as the Black Hawk Down incident, where they were trying to hunt down Farah Aidid, who is a major warlord in Somalia. Things have gotten a little bit better, but still things are not great. So if this would like to work, we can see some of the tomato ketchup there on the ground from where someone was injured, to put it mildly. But obviously there's a lot of stuff going on in the world, and not a lot of it is good news. And we have some things kind of that we're looking at for some good news segments already for at least tomorrow. But today, we're unfortunately not going to be ending on one of those. And quite frankly, it did not seem like the day to end it on a good note, because there are a lot of serious things going on in the world. And we would like to make a difference here as the new news. Here at TNN, we want to make we want to put some good back in the world. There's a lot of bad things going on, as I covered today. And so in the description below, there are a bunch of donation links you can go to for, we have Southeast Asia, which has been hit by a super typhoon. Super Typhoon Rai came in there. And there are many people injured and who have been killed, who are missing, who have lost their homes. There's already some food and medicine insecurities there. Same thing with Somalia. There was already food and water insecurities in that nation, as well as just general security needs. And they are now going in the worst drought in a decade. 90% of the country is dry. And of course, the big news story that has caught everyone's attention for the last 55 days and will continue to catch everyone's attention until it is finished, and even then, the reconstruction efforts, the ongoing war in Ukraine, which is something that we feel very strongly here about here at TNN, because a lot of people here on our crew are personally affected by this. And so we have a lot of links for that as well. This renewed offensive is going to cause even more humanitarian crisis, more suffering on the individual people in that country. So if you can't give a lot, give a little, because everything helps. And even if you can't give something, please like and subscribe, because the reason we say that isn't because we're trying, we want to become, the most popular thing here on Facebook or here on YouTube. I almost said Facebook. I apologize. But it's because we need the community support in order to put fundraisers onto this stream. Not just in the description, but on the stream itself, to do even more good. And once that happens, there's going to be a fundraiser on every single stream. We're never going to be doing super chats. It's always going to be a fundraiser. It's going to go to help people in the world. We vet these things to make sure that the majority of every dollar you donate doesn't go to those admissions costs. It doesn't go to the administrations and to the salaries. We vet these things to make sure the majority of the money goes to the people that need it. Some of the donations below have up to 97% of every donation goes to their programs. Most of them hover within the 80%. So, which is extremely good for a nonprofit organization. We want to continue to do that. We want to continue to help people. And in order for us to be able to do fundraisers directly on the stream and not just in the description, we need people to like and subscribe. We need to get the news out there. And we also want to be an unbiased news source. And so with that, I want to say thank you for joining us. I'm really happy that you guys continue to watch. A lot of people have been coming back and have been watching us. We've had a lot of growth on the Discord, which you can join the community too. We post a lot of stuff in there. I talk a lot with people in there about different things going on. I give updates regularly on there and the announcements about what's going on. And so please go ahead and join us there if you would like, if you want to get involved. And if you have any ideas on what we could do to improve any better news sources or any cool fundraisers, we can go ahead and get that stuff vetted and we can start using that. Some of it ends up here in the stream. And other than that, I appreciate you guys watching. I really hope that you are safe. I hope that your families are safe and your friends are safe. And I hope that you guys will be joining us tomorrow as we continue to cover the ongoing conflicts and the world news. Hopefully we'll have something good to end the night off with, but we'll be watching this very closely. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your night, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. All right. Good night.